The name of the album is Devotionals, and it's set to be released on December 11th. It is, yeah. I can finally reveal that on the podcast. Tell me about the writing of this album.
Well, this was the first album we wrote. I really think it's the first one we wrote with all three band members contributing, like, just totally involved in the writing process, like, contributing to, like, every song pretty much, like all three of us contributing. And it's really like, this really is like a sum of all our work and effort, and in terms of writing alone.
Yeah.
It's the most collaborative of the albums that we've had so far.
Yeah, for the previous albums, it's been, for the first two, mostly Pranjal and myself with contributions from others. Yeah. And then, like, the third, obviously, is just us. And then this one, the most collaborative, yes.
But yeah, I think we went into it being like, I love Black Hole Gods and I love Castaway Souls. I love Another Holy Trinity, but and they each are kind of like slowly evolving. They have a slightly different sound. I was kind of like, I didn't want to put out just another album that would just be comfortably sat there with those albums. Like that sounded kind of similar to those, and was more of the same. It's like I think I love that stuff, but I think I was burned out on writing it. Like, it's just like, not that I have done all, I just felt like it was played out to an extent, like, or where are we going to go from here? That was like a big thing. And I think we kind of came into the writing process for this one being like, we want to be as, I think Layla specifically said, like, we're all kind of open-minded people. We're not like super, possessive over like genres or anything. So like, let's just kind of write and bring stuff together and just take stuff and see where it goes, and like, I think like just like there were some stuff goes in like crazy directions in some cases, but I think it works. And I think I really like putting two things together and be like, oh, that totally works, even though like I wouldn't have thought that originally,
Now, typically, do your songs emerge out of jams, or do you write separately and then bring things to the table once you get together?
Both. So, well, actually, there's actually a third thing. So sometimes we'll have parts and then we bring them in. Other times we'll have jams and we capture it. And then other times, well, this has been more Pranjal and myself, we'll sit there and kind of do a kind of creative game of, okay, play something. We'll record it. Okay, now you play something. And that's actually how a good deal of various sections of the latest album came out. It's just kind of, it's like you play, and you try to be evocative of what the previous person was doing. So he'll be on bass, I'm on guitar,
and we'll see where it locks in. Yeah.
And so like sometimes it self-defines sometimes. So that's kind of our one of our quote unquote writing games. But we absolutely have stuff from jams. But like I mean, if from jams, if we use the length of some of the jams, oh my god, like 20 minutes for a single riff. I mean, they're beautiful, but like, so sometimes it'll come from this other direction. Yeah.
I often get, like we'll bring stuff in and, either record it or like, just humming it, we'll have the idea. Like I get a lot of my ideas musically and lyrically just from like from dreams and stuff like that. Funnily, might be I only mention it because it might be of interest given the name of your podcast. But like, yeah, so like, I'll wake up and I'll have heard this thing in my dream and I'll be like, I'll record like I'll just be like, oh shit, I got to get this down. I used to be like, oh, I'll remember it. And then I'll, promptly forget like 5 minutes later. So now I'm like, I have a little recorder thing next to my bed now. And so I'm like, if I hear it, something, I'll wake up and I'll just like hum it into the thing. And then so I'll come to practice. I'll be like, guys, check this out. I dreamt this riff. And it's like, my shitty recording, like half asleep recording of it.
Nathan, you should use those recordings for Fear 2.
Yeah.
in terms of, so speaking about dreaming from this last, well, there have been multiple albums where Well, actually, the third album, Castaway Souls, had some sections. I had to track on bass and was like focusing on bass to the point where like there was one song where I didn't have guitar parts, and I literally for whatever reason, I was just like focusing on bass, and like we're in the studio and we recorded bass. I'm like, okay, you need to have guitar parts tomorrow, and I literally like I'm laid down. I'm like, tomorrow, just think on it. Tomorrow, you got to record this, and then I went to sleep and. I woke up with the two guitar parts I needed. I'm like, okay, thank you. I just like woke up and like, oh, here's this one. So like, yeah, dreams are an important part of the process of writing actually for the band, but more generally, yeah.
I'd like to go back to this riff tag game that you guys have, because I think I haven't heard of anyone using this process to write songs before. I think typically, at least for metal bands, it'll be like, the guitarist will come in with a bunch of riffs, and the guitarist and the drummer will kind of hammer away at them to create a structure that they're happy with, and then everybody else adds their parts to that. What led you guys to choose this technique that you described?
I don't know when it happens. I think maybe the third album is when we started doing that, but like it was a process for this album as well. It's just that it works. Maybe for Pranjal, I don't know. Like for him, he's on bass, which is a melodic instrument, but like no, it just functions. I don't know. It's like we're just like, it's going to be creative. Here's the space, no judgment. And then like we are literally reacting to each other. It's like, here's this and respond to that.
The thing that works for me is like when we've done it for a little while and it's like, we're kind of in a thing, and like you just kind of like know what should come after, and then you just kind of pull that out and it just kind of emerges. And it's like, I think it's kind of my approach to writing music in general is that, music is something that just kind of it exists and it's there. And where we're kind of like, little antenna, like, or radios or something, and you kind of tune in and you channel, you pick up the signals and bring them out, like, so it's almost like, I think that tag game and that reacting thing, you suddenly, you've done that for a while, suddenly, like, oh, I know what should go here, like, and it just comes out, like, and it's happened before, and we've certainly used a lot of those riffs on this record and think the last one too.
Yeah, the tag game, yes, it works.
Is there a song on this album, on Devotionals, that you can point to as having used that technique?
Most of the songs in the album, actually.
Yeah, they at least have a riff or two that are in there.
Yeah, it's most of the songs.
I think like, the actual, the way we do things is like we'll come up with like, for example, like an A riff, a B riff, and a C riff or something like that. And then like, we'll get those parts down and then like, decide on how to structure those things in a way that it makes sense. That'll kind of come after. So like, at least one or two of the riffs on every song is we arrived at through that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on this latest album that was, from face to face, kind of back and forth.
Yeah, and just jamming, we'll come up, even if we come in with an idea, like, or a riff, we'll jam on that riff for a while, and then like, but like, 8 bars into it, Nate will pick, something else will come to Nate that's like, oh, that's what should come after that, or this sounds like it'll work with that, at some point. So yeah, it's cool. That's what I meant when I said it was like the most collaborative album we did. Like it was a lot of face to face, a lot of jamming, and like I think that really helps with the live feel of how the recording turned out.
Yeah.
So you mentioned storytelling and the lyrics telling stories. What stories do you tell on Devotionals?
So like the title Devotionals in itself, it suggests like, like a book of hymns or something like that. And I kind of wanted like each song to have like, a specific story, whether or not they kind of relate to an overall theme, but it's not, but each thing is like a specific like thing. So like there's some that are like specific mythology like related stories. So the song Night Marchers, for example, which is it's up on our Bandcamp now. You can stream that one before the album comes out. So the song Night Marchers was kind of loosely based on the story of these ghosts that, or a sort of folk tale around like Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, about the night marchers, these ghosts that appear like in marching in the hills around one of the islands, and it's supposed to be like, spirits from the past marching when things aren't right in the present. I thought that idea was a very evocative one. So that's kind of like loosely based on that. It's not literally telling that same story. The second track on the album too is called Mrityunjay. Hindi word. My family background is Indian. You can probably tell from my name, but that's a Hindi word that means death conqueror, which is the name given to a character in the Mahabharata, one of the Hindu holy books. Character name of Karna, which I think like he has a really, if you haven't heard his story, you should go look it up. It's very, very evocative of different human things. Like he's given up at birth by his highborn family because he's illegitimate child, and then he's raised by people of more humble station in life, and when time comes to it, he chooses to stay with the people that raised him rather than like go back to his bloodline thing, even though he'd be like a prince or whatever. And it's so that's like those are like kind of specific. I mean, again, I'm not telling that same story. It's like kind of based on that story, and those are kind of specific. Then like there's more personal, like kind of, or like more. The songs Gannett, for example, the first one, and then the third track too, The Imposter, more kind of like personal stuff. Gannett is more a story about the being like the control, that the story of a person that's just controlled by their anxiety and their like paranoia, basically. And then there's two tracks on the album, Canticle and Abyss, that are kind of riffing off meeting the devil at the crossroads, the old sort of story or trope or whatever. One is Abyss. Canticle, is told from the point of view of the devil, kind of making the person an offer at the crossroads. And then the Abyss is kind of like told from the point of view of the person that accepted the offer and is now kind of like, has got the wealth of the world and is also damned. So, it's kind of like it's a mix of different things. I think I try and, even with these mythological sort of influences, I try and tell like my own version of it rather than just the story itself, and try and make it personal a little bit.
So you've delved into Hinduism before on your lyrics, right, Pranjal?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, Hinduism has such a long history of, I mean, not history, but like the mythology is so rich with all these gods and tales and stories. I'm curious, did you find it was a natural fit for your music?
Somewhat, yeah. I think, it's definitely, something you can get lost in, something you can wander in, something that has a lot of space between the lines that you can, read into different meanings and stuff. I think, as with all religious texts, I think I as far as me writing lyrics goes, I kind of wanted to go with the Hindu stuff just because it is my background too. And I'm like, there's, I don't know, you see a lot of metal bands writing about, obviously the Christian stuff or anti-Christian stuff, like in metal is like everywhere. And then like, there's everyone's, people writing like, I don't know what, like runes and shit these days, of like pagan stuff, and like, a lot of European influence stuff, which is cool. But it's like, I was like, oh, it'd be cool if I brought like some of my own thing to that, like 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 the Indian or Hindu influence, and like you said, once I thought about that, it's like you look into it and it's like, holy shit, it's like so rich, and it's so there's so much stuff to draw from, I think it becomes a natural fit for sure. And there's a lot of bands doing that kind of stuff, like bands from your part of the world, Rudra.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just like super. I mean, they go super deep into that stuff. But, there's others from like the storytelling perspective. There's like doom bands from India. There's the Gin and Miskatonic, who the friends of ours, like they don't really talk about Hinduism in their songs, but they tell stories from the canon, maybe that because they're such cool stories to riff on, and they tell you so much stuff about like it's like Candlemass telling the epic tales of like, you know, this and that, but or why not go into a different canon and something that's, you know, close to your background too. I mean, that was my sort of approach to it. I mean, Nate's always been interested in this stuff as well. You know, he's doesn't come from a Hindu background, but has read a lot of this stuff, and because he's just into mythology and stuff like that too.
I am.
I mean, it's funny how many European black metal bands have used Kali and Shiva as influences or as inspiration.
Oh no, I think it's interesting that they do that, and then often it's done as like there's this very Christian telling or Christian lens through which they view it. Like Kali is like is like, you know, Lilith or something like that, you know, out of the Bible. Yeah. It's like, you know, and it's like the consort of Satan, and it's like, oh yeah, there's some hints about like, okay, it's not Christianity, it's not good or evil or that kind of stuff. But like the way the imagery is used is definitely in a like as a substitute for like satanic imagery, you know.
It's cool
and dark and bloody and shit. You know? So it's like it's you know, it's which is funny to me, like that you know, Dissection had that song on the last album before John killed himself with the Jai Mahakali was the name of the song, and it was just like it's just hilarious because it's like this, you know. Dissection was as much a satanic project as a musical project, you know, and sort of bringing in Hinduism and Kali into that, like, was just it was I laughed the first time I heard it. I was like, what is this, like? But yeah, I think the use of the stuff, you know, maybe if you grew up with that canon, you'll have a different take on it than someone who's just coming to it now.
So I also wonder in a couple places, well, not wonder, but like, I think maybe Pranjal is also influenced by, not just by mythology, but also by music from India. So like we have some sections that seem very much more like a tala, you know, like they're not like metrically like Western music. There was one point the first time he came in with this riff, it was like do 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 do. It's like it's not like it's not really based on like this kind of Western idea of meter. It's based on it seems closer to like Indian music where it's like it's like tala. It's like there are phrases, as you would say. You know, and it's like
that's interesting. I never consciously did that, but it makes sense. Like, say, I mean, there's the drums on the beginning of Imposter too, the third track, that is like, you know, just toms, but kind of playing a somewhat like a tabla style tanaka sort of rhythm going on.
Tanaka.